Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of In Conversation with Divyam and Ayush. We are so happy from the response on the first video. If you haven't seen our first video introduction, check this video out here and you'll find out what we do on this channel. And so let's jump right into our book for today. Start with Why by Simon Sinek. Divyam, why don't you kick us on with some thoughts about your take on this book?
Okay. Simon is an individual who is inspired by inspiring others to do what inspires them. In this book, he has given us why we do what we do, why Apple has such a consumer base that no matter what happens, its customer always goes to Apple and even stand for 6 hours in lines to get its new product. Why King Martin Luther Jr. He inspired a whole country, a whole nation to change its prejudices. Why things happen the way they happen, why some people are very successful and why some are not. So all these things have been covered in the book. Ayush, what do you think about the book?
Okay, so I think the most important thing that I got out of this book was Simon's distinction and his ability to draw patterns out of great leaders. And what he does is he differentiates between three key kinds of people and on organizations as well: people who motivate, people who are leaders, and people who lead. So let's walk through these. So people who motivate are people who who try to manipulate. They can use deceptive means, not necessarily, but they do things to get some deal done. Whatever measures are necessary,
Yeah,
maybe fear of
yeah,
missing
like
out, whatever it takes, but they
yeah, like
create.
pricing, they decrease prices if it's a
Exactly. So
company, right?
they do
Yeah,
things to get the deal done. Then there are people who are leaders. So these are people who sit just because of their rank at in the hierarchy at the top of an organization. So these can be people
right.
like CEOs, CFOs, anyone or any executive who sit at the top of an organization.
Right.
And by the nature of an organization and the hierarchical structure, you don't have a choice, but you have to follow them just because of the foundation of your duties. And then there are third kind of people, and these are the people who lead. And these people don't ask you for their following, but they have a cult like following. People follow them because they do want to follow them. And so
Mhm.
Simon talks throughout this book about what are the key properties of these people, and as the title suggests, the one key property of these people is that they always, in whatever they do, start with a why. If they form organizations, then they have a why for why that organization exists, and they do everything starting from the why for that organization, and even in their personal life. So Simon talks about Bill Gates and how he did
Right.
what he did for Microsoft and following that he did for killing malaria and then doing all his philanthropic work, right? So he has a personal why to help and solve
Yeah.
problems and help people. And
Mhm.
so that's how great leaders do. They start with a why. And so
Right.
yeah, so let's jump into the topics, different themes and topics of this book. So
Yeah.
I'll let you start
So the
our first theme.
yeah, sorry. So the major theme of the book is revolving around the golden circle. What the golden circle is there are three concentric circles. The innermost circle, there is why, right? And then how, and then what. People, those people that you are talking about, those who inspire, they always tell their why. They always show why they are doing something, right? There are people who start with how. They are operations people. They start with how. They know how to do stuff and how to get things done. These people are the top ladder people, like the CTOs, the CFOs, right? And then there is what. What is what a person does or what the company does. Advertising teams, I believe, Ayush, sometimes make a mistake that they start with what. If they are building a product, let's say Apple is making a product, they are bringing a new iPhone lineup, right? So they will say that building we have got a new iPhone for you. It has 64 GB of rams and let's say 512 GB of
iPhone's
hard
wrong
drive.
example because iPhone never does that, but let's go.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. But Apple never does that, right? Because why it never does this? Because it always starts with why. I remember an advertisement where they just said that if it's not an iPhone, it's not an iPhone.
Mhm.
Like, what kind of advertising strategy is that, right? And they never tell what they do because people who follow them, they are challenging the status quo, and that's what Apple's belief is, and that's where come and say that if it's not an iPhone, it's not an iPhone. Let's say King Martin Luther Jr. He inspired a whole country to follow him.
Mhm.
And what the words he used is, "I have a dream," right? "I have a dream" is such a very powerful phrase that he never told that these are the 12 steps that you can do to get yourself to something, a free US or a free nation or a less prejudiced nation, right? But how to do it, that was not mentioned by him. Why to do it was mentioned by him very clearly. I believe, I believe, I believe. So these things, these are minute things that people miss, and they start with what to do. If the politicians these days are like, I have to, I'll be changing the roads, I'll be bringing water to every house. But why should be clearly mentioned to develop a cult like following, right? What do you think about the golden circle?
So I think golden circle is a very simple structure, and there are two ways to parse this golden circle, and that's the most important point of a golden circle, because everyone does these things. Almost all good organizations know what they do and how they do it. By maybe a little less, but they know these things. What most of the organization fall in the trap of, and this is the most common theme, they start from the outside end. So they go, what they do, they can, everyone can tell you what they do, right? Maybe they are in consumer electronics, maybe they are in grocery business, anything. It can be any bizarre thing, but they know what they do. And then there will be people who know how they do it, their processes and their systems. And then there is the question of why they do it, and maybe some rare organizations will know why they do it. Some organizations will do, which will end up becoming $1 billion businesses. They will later in their process figure out why they do something, and they will have some narration around it. But this is a key point about the great leaders and the great visionaries. Sorry, and they always start with why. So what these people will do is, for their life, for their organizations, they will know what the why is, and they will start going from inside out. And so here you can see in this figure that this is the two-dimensional structure of a golden circle, but there is a more concrete three-dimensional version of it. So this is the three-dimensional version of this golden circle. And what this tells us is how great organizations work, right? And so regardless of the structure of any organization, the leaders, the visionaries, the CEOs will always sit at the top, on the smaller end of this cone-like structure, which is actually a megaphone. And there is this marketplace at the bottom, right? And so once an organization grows, so in the beginning, when it's a small organization, the CEO gets to directly get in contact with the marketplace, and it's all well and good. It's a small business, all good. If you do want to become the Apple or the next Microsoft, then there's the CEO sitting at the top, and there are hundreds, 100,000 people in between in your chain, and there will be some people at the bottom who will talk to the marketplace. And the only way the CEO gets to talk to the marketplace is through this chain. So this microphone is like a filter, right? Everything that he has to do goes through it. And so what this megaphone does is it amplifies. And in general, in a microphone, the thing which is at the larger end in the sketch, which is the what, never gets amplified, but it gets magnified. And on the other end, the thing which is the why, it always gets magnified. And it's so bizarre that the organizations don't even know what their why is, right? If they don't know it, what are they trying to say? So when they don't know what the why is, they keep doing all the random things, and they keep throwing spaghetti on the wall in the hopes that something will stick, right? And so that's the problem. And so that's what I take from the golden circle. The way to start anything is first to know why you are doing something, in personal lives, in organization, in business, everything. Once you know it, then surround yourselves with people who can make your vision come true. Then these are the how type people. There are, and Simon mentions that there are fundamentally why type people and how type people. I don't very strongly agree with it. I think there are lots of great people who are CEOs and CTOs, right? CEOs are visionaries, CTOs are how types. There are lots of people who do that, but not one person cannot make that happen. So I think, so that's my take on this. But I think you should then surround yourself with the people who are the how types. Surround yourself with as many people who are brilliant at what they do and who can make your vision come true. And do everything, every single waking hour to preach your vision to them. And once these people are also leaders, but they are a how type. So they can hire people, they can form teams, and then they will make the what type people, right? They will make the what of the organization. So these will be the results of their actions. And then this what, maybe this is the product, maybe it has great user experience. This what will interact with the marketplace. And that's how you make a
Right.
great organization. And that's what I took from the Golden Circle. Anything you would like to add?
Leadership, yeah, I would also like to say that one point to the what Simon also said in the book is leadership is about two things, right? One, the vision must be very clear, and also one more important aspect that I believe that you were saying in that microphone thing is that the way you communicate, because there are a lot of people, and I remember an example from the book. Let's say like 10 people, 10 of us are stranded on an island, and all of us, there is one guy who stands up and says that everyone has some idea, like everyone wants to survive, so right, everyone will have some ideas what to do. And let's say one guy stand up and he asks, what do you think we should do? So some xyz person says that let's build a shelter so that we are safe from wild animals. Other person says, so the leader says, yeah, you are right, we should do that. The other person says that let's start fishing, we'll have something to eat, right? So he says, yeah, that's also a great idea. The other person says that why not we start to make a fire so that we will stay warm. He says that's also a great idea, let's do that. And there is one more guy who stands up and says that while the boat was coming to the shore, what I see was there was a village at the other end of the island, and there is this dense jungle in between, and I am going in it, and I would love if anyone else joins me, but I am going, and I know that we'll reach there and we'll be safe. So what do you think, who will you follow?
I will obviously
Obviously,
follow the guy who's going in the jungle. I'm a crazy kind.
yeah, yeah, no, I think everyone, because even if there was no village and it was just his illusion, but what I believe is that belief is very strong, right?
Right.
And when they will go, everyone will have a same goal, that we have to reach that village and save ourselves. And the belief, I believe it is very important for any kind of business or even in life. If I remember one quote from Henry Ford, like, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. You are right. So that thing, the belief system should be very strong.
Right.
Also, now one thing that Simon in this book
So before
came up,
we even move on, so one addition to
yeah,
that, so I remember this saying from Sam Altman, who is the chair, like who was, I think, who was the head of Y Combinator and the biggest startup
mhm,
incubator in the world. And what he says
yeah,
is that the easiest businesses to succeed and to lead are the ones who are the hardest to make. And so basically what this says is, you can, lots of entrepreneurs think about what kind of businesses they want to make, and some often end up,
right,
hey, this is too hard, or this seems improbable, right? And
yeah,
what he
right,
says is, these are the business which are easiest to make happen. Because, and here's the reason, when you take journeys that are almost impossible, all the smart people will want to back you, and they will be excited by your vision. And I've seen this
right,
happen so many times in so many different companies. If a person is willing to take the hard action, he will be backed by
yeah,
people, because it inspires the
right,
fabric of humanity. We want to expand and push the
right,
boundaries, right? And so that's very exciting for
right,
everyone. And this doesn't go for entrepreneurs, this goes for every single person. Even if you are
right,
not the kind of, like, the risk taking person, right? It will at least
right,
excite you that someone is doing that. That's just the nature of us.
exactly,
And on
exactly,
the other hand, people who do things just for the sake of profitability, hey, this is easy profit, this is the low hanging fruit, let's just go and grab that. I think those businesses can attract people for the profitability, but it's not inspiring.
right,
It's not an inspiring vision. That can be
yeah,
part of the short term journey of a great organization, because great organizations do need to support themselves. So I think those things should always be part of a smaller goal for sustainability. But the big vision should always be very grand. And so yeah, that's something that came to my mind. So yeah.
Good. So one more thing that Simon emphasized a lot was trust, right?
Right.
So in this book, so trust and leadership goes hand in hand, because if you trust and innovation as well goes hand in hand, because if you have trust, then you will be willing to take risks, and if you take risk, there are a very high chance that you'll succeed and innovate something, you will bring something good, right? I remember one example of circus. The performers, remember, like there are performers, if there is a net that is very strong and won't let the performers get hurt even if they fall down.
Right.
So the trust that performance will have in the circus will let them expand their stunts, will let them push their limits and find something new, something different. And that's where innovation happens. Innovation happens on the edge, I believe. Because one more example, when Wright brothers created or invented the airplane, one more guy was there, Mr. Langley.
Right.
He was backed up with a lot of money. He had the most successful brains of the country at that time. He had the best connections a person can have. But still, he could not achieve what Wright brothers could do, even though they were not well educated. Like none of them had a college degree, right?
Right.
Even not the Wright brothers, nor the people who were building it, as well as they were not having money, so they used to get the money out of their bicycle shop and then use it to build the plane. But everyone knows that who built the plane, right? So that's when belief and trust comes in. Every individual who was working on that plane believed in Wright brothers, and that's when the new thing happened, and that's where the plane was built. What do you think, Ayush, is trust? Like, how will you define trust for you?
Yeah, I totally love what you said. So let me just expand on that.
Yeah.
So I think safety net, it is, I think it's a fundamental right for people who are innovators, that leaders need to protect the people in their organization. Leaders are visionaries, but there are so many innovators in an organization, and it's the job of a great leader to protect them and to provide them with that safety net. It's not something that is a feature, it's a necessity. And so that's how I think about it. And so one thing which is a choice, and it depends on the situation. You always have to be transparent to your customers, but in many situations you don't have to show that there is a safety net, right? There just needs to be a safety net, and the person who is innovating needs to know that there is a safety net.
Should
but
have a belief in his employer, right?
Right, and other people don't need to know that there is a safety net over it.
Yeah, right.
And sorry. So I remember this example, and this is again from one of the lessons I was taking from Y Combinator, and I also heard this in my eShip class last like 2 quarters ago. And this was a discussion about how you fire people, right? And one of the most important but most difficult jobs of an entrepreneur.
Right.
If people don't align with the vision, or they're not helping the organization grow in the right direction, you have to fire people. And I think it's not just a service to the organization, it's a service to the person, because time and again, I've never fired anyone, but from what I've heard, time and again, what people have seen is if you don't fire the person at the right time, and if they are not growing in the organization, and if you don't fire them, they get depressed. They actually get clinical depression, because everyone wants to contribute, and it makes people happy when they can see that they are contributing to a greater cause. And that's the underlying journey of the why, right? And so what they told, like, what's the easiest way to fire, right? This was kind of the question, how do you fire people, and all these kinds of questions. And so what I had heard from these different people, and this was the same thought, that what you have to do while firing people is to be extraordinarily empathetic towards them, because you are going to be having a huge impact in their lives, and they have probably spent a lot of time in this organization, sometimes not, sometimes you fire them early. So what this entrepreneur, I don't remember who, but what this entrepreneur told was, bring them into your office, and let them lead the discussion of firing. So one thing that the first thing that you have to make sure is, hey, this is not working out, so you are getting fired. That has to be a baseline, because if you don't tell that, then there is like all this going back and forth and there's no firm decision. So you have to do that. But after you do that, then let the person dictate the terms. Maybe you can have a very good severance package. Maybe help them find a next job. You hired them for some reasons, right? You were there, you were involved, so you saw some good qualities. Maybe that was not a cultural fit, but you know that they are a great person. That's why they were hired. So maybe help them find a new job. So this entrepreneur did help them find a new job, and then while for 2 months, and before he could get this guy a job, he paid 2 months of his salary with the severance. And so that's called a great safety net, right? Don't make people feel that they're not taking risks, because risks are great for innovations. But then when it comes time to be empathetic, be empathetic. Let people know that innovation will always be rewarded. Take risks. So that's how I think about trust. And I think that tells a lot about the character of a leader when things like this happen. Even when this person will not be contributing anymore to your organization, how do you act as a leader? Right? It's not just about the organization. It's bigger than that. So yeah, that's what my take on trust is.
True. So one more thing that I would like to mention regarding trust is, when you have trust in somebody, when people trust you, you get an authority, and you should always do what you preach, right? Your actions will speak. Let's say I preach that one should always eat healthy food, and I go to the supermarket, I buy some vegetables, but I also buy chocolates, I buy chips, I buy wafers. And then while I'm going back to check out, people will see me. They won't tell anything, they won't ask me anything, but then they will not trust me. Their belief system won't work on me anymore. And that's how a lot of companies fail, because their actions don't align with what they preach. So this is also what Simon told in the book. And one more thing, the law of diffusion of innovation. Ayush, law of diffusion of innovation.
Okay, so here's the figure for the law of diffusion of innovation. Basically, what the law of diffusion of innovation, as I learned from this book, told us was, and a very true fact for people who do crazy kinds of innovations, right? That there will be this kind of a bell curve, and then there will be some people who will adopt it early, and then there will be laggards, right? Who will you cannot do anything to convince them to be supported, and then there is the middle majority.
Only when the keypad phones are gone, they'll buy the touch.
Exactly. And there is this middle majority, and that these people don't like to take risks, so they will let the early adopters do it first. And on the very left side is also this small section of innovators. So these are the people who take great risks. And so I think a lot of organizations, and the example from the book is TiVo. And so a lot of great organizations, what they do wrong, and that's what kills them, is they try to go directly to the middle. So this is TiVo, one of the great products, did this. They went to address the mass market, and it killed them, because people in the middle don't adopt anything unless you go to the early adopters and innovators.
Early adopters, right? You have to get to the tipping point that is said in the book, right? The tipping point where the early adopters and the innovators, where all of them are willing to use your product, and that's when the tipping point comes, right? If it's like when then everyone starts buying it.
Right. And I think the loyalty is formed on the left side, right? And this is very important.
The left side of the curve, right?
So these are the people who would go to great lengths to make your product come through. And I've listened to so many case studies, and this is such a common theme, that there are people who love talking to entrepreneurs. They just love getting involved in the process. It makes them feel special when the founder actually comes and talks to them. And the founder can only do this for so many people. So this happens for the innovators and early adopters. And I think this is like an exchange, right? From the founder side, he takes their feedbacks, and that feedback gets incorporated in the product so closely, because this is this constant back and forth and iterative process, even when the product is not developed. And in exchange for that, these early adopters stand in line, long lines, 6 hours of lines to get this
Yeah.
product, and they pay back with their loyalty. And so I think this is such a great bond. It's a bond between a visionary and a market, and there can be only so much overlap. And so that's the place where the founder gets to go out of the microphone. It still has to follow the why, but it's like a caveat. He gets to talk, he or she gets to talk to the marketplace. And so that's what I think about this law of diffusion, that you have to innovate for the people who are loyal to you. And that's where your market is. And if it's innovative, if it provides some utility, the others will automatically follow. So go for the people who care about it, basically.
True. So in the last example that I would like to bring up now is the example of Ben.
Right.
So a great example. So remember, Ben was running a race, and everyone, like, he had some mental disability because of which he was unable to
Cerebral
run
palsy.
at a pace.
It was cerebral palsy.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was not able to compete with others, right? He was not very flexible. He could not run long distances very easily like any other people were doing at that time. So Ben started running, and he fall down. He got up again, and he started running again, and he again fell down. He got up again, then he started running again. He again fall down, and he got up again, and he was still running.
Right.
So, and at the end, everyone finished the race in like 25 minutes.
Right.
It took 45 minutes for Ben to complete the race, right? So, what do you think is the take? Like, people are saying that it's not the story that never give up. When you fall down, always stand up. It's not the story for that. He was completely bleeding when he was getting back up after a few times. But the thing that you must remember was there were people, everyone who was running then was running behind him and was helping him to get back up, right?
Right.
What do you think is the moral of this story?
Yeah, so I think it teaches us a lot about the attitude of people, and not only just the attitude of people who helped him, but attitude of Ben. So he was actually thinking like a great visionary. He made a different mission, and that was to
Right.
just keep growing. And
He was not competing with anyone else. He
this
was
is
competing
the
with
lane of
himself.
the herds, and this is where he was running. He was going all the way alone. And
True.
when this happens, when people see someone doing great things, this was a great. I have this is unheard of. A person with cerebral palsy running in a race, right? So when people
True.
see him fighting
It
his
gives me
battle,
goosebumps.
people would help him. People would cheer for him. When he fell down, if anyone was near him, they will pick him up and then continue their race. Which was astounding. In a race, people will stop, pick him up, and then go. So what this tells us is, if you do the great thing and if you do it with the right attitude, people will automatically be attracted to you. They will come and join you in your mission. And
Right.
don't compete with them. Don't pull them down, basically. And one thing that I do think, which doesn't go with this book, is competition. So that we can have this for some other time. There's a whole debate
Yeah.
about competition,
Yeah, right.
but just bringing a nugget of that here. There are two kinds of competition: a healthy competition and a bad competition. And I do think competition is really good for winners, and you can see that in very good athletes, tennis, and everywhere. All the grades
True.
in athletics, they do a healthy competition. They pull each other up, right? And so
Right.
you compete with each other to pull each other up, and that's a very good kind of competition, I think, just for the consumer, but for these people as well. But then there are also great leaders who don't even compete. They go in the separate lane and they do compete with themselves. And that's what I think Ben teaches us, that you keep going, you have a great vision, and you keep competing with yourselves, and customers, people, they will align with your vision, and only the people
Right.
who do belong with you will come. And if someone doesn't help him, it's okay. They don't belong in this journey, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So that was my take. Enlighten us with your take.
That's what I believe is he was competing with himself. He was not competing with anyone else. And that's why everyone was there for him. Because if you try to pull someone down, in long run, no one would stand for you.
Right.
But if you are working very hard to achieve something that you believe, everyone will come and help you. That's my belief. And now let's end this video.
No, I have one more topic. So let's
Yeah.
follow for that. I think this is one of the one of the most important topics as well for the book, and that was the celery test. So I think you did mention a little bit of that, but we cannot end this video without talking celery test. So
Yeah, right.
basically, what celery test does is it's like this microphone, and you put a filter in between that, and this gives you a guide of decision making. So what I'll do is I'll let you kick us off with the celery test, and I'll add some narratives that I have from my life.
That example of supermarket that I gave, right?
Right.
This was the celery test, but I just didn't mention it.
Right.
Like, people will always see what you do. Your actions will be accounted for your why. Your why should always align with your actions. And the celery test is, if you do something, so always go back and ask yourself, is this aligned with my why? Even if you have to suffer a loss for that in short run, but always ask that, if I, let's say, if I make this shady deal, so is this aligned with my why? If that's not aligned with your why, even if it's giving you short-term profits, you should not do it.
It's a
So
shady.
that's
It's
what.
a shady deal. So by definition, it's not aligned. That's why it's shady.
Okay, so yeah, right. But even if it's not, even if somebody comes to you and gives you a lot of money
Right.
for doing something that you do not believe in, right?
Right.
So even if somebody comes to Apple and says that, I'm giving you a lot of money, build me a product that Apple don't believe in. So I don't think Apple will make it. And that's why their why is aligned with what they do. And that's what celery test is.
Okay, so
right?
so a great example, like I remembered a very good example for this. When you said a great sum of money, this is a story from Tableau, and so Kelly, who's on the board of Tableau, she came to our eShip class a couple quarters ago, and
Mhm.
what she said was, when they were doing B2B sales, in the beginning they were doing a lot of sales, and there was this customer who is willing to pay them twice the amount that the company was completely worth. And so the entire sales team wanted to take that deal. And it was Kelly who made it was a hard no, you cannot take that deal. Because what these people wanted was, and this was like not even a huge deal, this was a very small deal. And it was, they wanted some features to be built into the product which will help them. And Kelly thought, is this in alignment with what we think about this product? And Tableau, as people know, it's a data visualization software, right? And so it was supposed to be for people to make the prototyping very easy for data visualization. And so it didn't align with the vision. And so they turned down
Right.
that huge deal, huge 6 months, 1 year of work, just to just to stay on focus with their vision. And now they are a multi-billion-dollar company. So stick to your convictions. And another thing about celery test is the topic of consistency, right? So like when you have to make this, so for example, for CFOs, right? The one line, here's a one line MBA. What CFOs or MBAs are told is, compute the net present value NPV of any decision. If it's positive, do it. One line MBA, right? And that's what you do. And I think so. This is just a one line crash course for being a leader. Does it align with your why? Yes, do it. If it doesn't, whatever happens, whatever the hell happens,
no matter what it
no way you should do it. Even if it gives you good returns in the short term, it will never give you good returns in the long run. So just don't do it. Your time is your biggest asset, and stick to your convictions. Go for your why, and yeah, I think that's the only way to do it. Okay, let's end our discussion for today.
Thank you for the great response on our previous video. Feel free to comment down whatever your take was on this book. We are looking forward to learn from you. And for the next week, we are going to read The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. The link is in the description. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having. Click here and read our intro or watch our should read.
Cut.
Sorry. Cut. Cut.